always moving, tail's moving. And what I'm going to be working on with you is your awareness, and your awareness, and your aware. Remember the. Hold the eye contact. Nope. Nope. Don't push him. This is old behavior. This is the tail's wagging. Hold the eye contact. Hold the eye contact. Wait. This is the patient. Hold the eye contact. We're waiting for the tail to stop. We're being disciplined here. Looking back over his left shoulder. Turn towards me. Because when I came in, I established a boundary because I ignored him. Smelling the ground happens before a submission. Turn toward me. Round number 2. Look how wet his nose is. Look at how watery his eyes are becoming. Occasionally, when you make really good hold the eye contact briefly with him. Turn towards him. Briefly make eye contact. Now turn sideways. When he. An indication of high energy levels. Hold the eye contact. Hold the eye contact. He sat himself. See how he wants to inch. Not collapse the boundary. This is. If he comes toward me, I'm going to walk into him to make him back up. This is good. This is. He's being. That's. He's looking for a way out. He's trying to figure out. He's being triggered to submit. He doesn't out because nature always wins. You see how the paw just came up a little? Swallowing the bark. Progress to submission. Out of his own space. Hold the eye contact. There's a yawn. This is what we're you never trap a dog, but you do confront. And what he's learning is you know how we know we're not trapping him? Because he's not getting aggressive. Notice when he looks at me that here comes the submission. Stretching. Briefly hold eye contact. Pause up. It's just hard to figure out. Hold the eye contact. To tell him that the hard part that he needs to learn how to do, he's got drips of water forming on his nose right now. That's how relaxed he's becoming. Eye contact patience. Notice the tail just stopped. Notice the tail stops and the barking stops. See how he has to touch something with the brain. That's the thing. Licking the chops happens before you honor submission. Hold the eye. We're triggering him to submit. He doesn't want to submit. He wants to collapse the boundary towards you without having to touch you like the pup is. Hey! Look at how wet that nose is. And you saw the sigh? We just made another little turn of the corner there. Nope. We're establishing a boundary. Good. Needs to be a little bit. He's allowed to do this. He still has to. We've disappeared. He's just about to bring us back. We're still, and that's why he's not louder. Moment of eye contact. We'll walk away, and we'll be done with this training context here. Briefly make eye contact. Turn and walk away. Ignore him.